Thank you all so much for joining us today. We are going to get started. We have a fairly long presentation to get through, and we want to make sure we have time for questions and answers. My name is David Carnevale. I am the Assistant Vice President of Undergraduate Financial Aid. Joining me today on this call are Jonathan Sharas, the Assistant Director of Undergraduate Financial Aid. You'll be able to see him in the video. He'll be asking questions live. From the undergraduate financial aid team, we also have Erica Ruffalo, who will be joining us, and Teresa Dolan, who are financial aid counselors, senior financial aid counselors. They'll be joining us as well to answer questions in the chat. And we have some of our friends from the Office of Admission, Maricruz, Steele, Jamie, Andrea, and Cameron, who are going to be there to answer any kind of questions that we may have. A couple of housekeeping items. Please use the Q&A section. That will be your way to communicate and ask questions. We'll start answering questions at the end of the presentation. We will try to get to all the questions. So you only need to type it in there once and we'll get to it. If we're not getting an answer right away, we're probably going to be taking that question live. If it's a very specific question, someone from my office may be reaching out to you separately to discuss the questions with you. The webinar link will be emailed to you after the presentation and probably go out tomorrow morning is my guess. So you will have an opportunity to review the webinar a second time if you need that. Without any further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started here. Just one moment. We're going to be looking tonight at a couple of things. First of all, who we are and what we do in the Office of Financial Aid. We're going to look at tuition financial aid, the application process and deadlines, and some frequently asked questions that you may have. The focus is going to be on undergraduate students applying to Chapman for fall 2025 term or later. The information is pretty much the same if you're a student who's going to be joining us in the spring coming up. The deadline dates will be a little bit different as well. Most information will apply to U.S. citizens, eligible non-citizens, California DREAM Act students. International students will work closely with their admission counselor, and we'll talk a little bit about international financial aid towards the end of the presentation as well. So who are we and what do we do in the financial aid office? The first thing to know is where you can find us. We're located in the Bethal Student Service Center directly behind the Fowler Law School. We do have a parking structure directly behind us. Our hours are there for you. We do close for lunch every day from 12:30 to 1:30. And the fastest way to get in contact with us is by utilizing email, finaid@chapman.edu. Most questions can be answered by email. We can schedule appointments, and we can also schedule a time to give you a phone call if you'd rather talk over the phone, or a virtual appointment. We do in-person and virtual appointments and telephone appointments as well. So what do? We receive the results of your FAFSA. We generate all of your various awards, put them in one place for you to look at. We process and disperse all of those different awards, including student loans. We process your loan applications from all sources, and we assist students with scholarship searches. So basically anything financial aid related is going to come through us. Things that we don't do, we don't generate your bill or a payment plan. That's through our colleagues in the Student Business Services. We don't process any payments or take any payments in our office. That's also Student Business Services, also called the Business Office. If you have students at other schools, for the parents that are online, that would be similar to the bursar's office, but Student Business Services is any kind of payment. We don't provide proof of enrollment. That's our university registrar's office. And the nice thing is all three offices are in the same building. We share the same lobby. So if you happen to walk up to our window and you have a question about your billing, if we can't help you out, we'll make sure that you get right next door and one of our colleagues will be able to help you out. Same thing with the office of the registrar. Tuition financial aid. Our tuition for this current academic year, when we're looking at the tuition, the mandatory student fee and health fee, typical housing charges for a first-year student, and food charges, which is a meal plan for a first-year student, totals out to about $82,798. Now, there are some other fees that some students may have. Lab fees might be included depending on the types of courses that students are taking. But generally, everything's all encompassing. Most students will have that bill of the 82,798. What tools do we have in our toolbox to help you pay that bill? The first, we're looking at college savings plans, other savings that you may have, monthly income, because as I mentioned earlier, you can use a payment plan through the university. It's a no interest payment plan that pays you off within 10 months. So each academic year is paid off as you go. But also, why you're here this evening is the financial aid component. So when we're talking about financial aid, we're talking about grants and scholarships, work study, student loans, parent loans, and private loans. All of those types of awards fall under the category of financial aid. So we're not just talking about grants and scholarships. We're not just talking about loans. We're talking about everything all encompassing. We're talking about it from the university, the federal government, the state government, and private foundations. So we're looking at the one application that's going to open you up for all this type of eligibility. Um, it's not separate applications for each item. It's one application that we utilize, which is the FAFSA. So some things you need to know about financial aid. The average package this year was about $33,000. We've committed $206 million in the 2024-25 academic year, that's the current year, towards grant funding and scholarship funding for students. And about 86% of our undergraduate students are receiving some form of financial aid. So we really do have a commitment to making sure that we have financial resources available to you. Where does that money come from? So when we're looking at the overall financial aid dollars that come into the university, 59, almost 60% of funding is actually coming from the university through grants and scholarships. You'll look in there, federal loans are about 28%, and then everything else is in the 3% to 1% range. That's the private scholarships, the state grants, and the federal grants and work study. The application process is fairly simple. All students are reviewed for merit scholarships at the point of admission. So when you submit your application for admission, it's going to be reviewed, and if we're able to offer you a merit scholarship based on your application, we will do so. So the due date on that is to follow your admission deadline, depending on early action, early decision, or regular decision. All applicants are going to be reviewed. There's nothing additional that you need to submit in order to be considered for a merit scholarship. You'll receive a letter with your offer of admission if you do receive a merit scholarship that will tell you exactly how much you're going to receive per year, and that's valid for 4 years. Departmental scholarships are a little bit different. Some departments on campus do have financial aid funds available, scholarship funds. They're going to follow the admission deadline as well. And a few of them do require some sort of creative supplement, portfolio, or audition. Those are going to be more in the creative arts. Other departments that have funding are going to be looking at your transcripts, your personal statements, your admission application, and see if they can offer you funding that way. For all other types of financial aid, those are our need-based types of financial aid, you're going to use the free application for federal student aid, or the FAFSA, and that's for any grants, work study, student loans, and parent loans that we can offer. The FAFSA will open up on December 1st. We want you to submit it as early as you can to avoid any kind of complication with the FAFSA, and make sure that we get it in our office in plenty of time to submit an award to you. Students who have completed the application process for financial aid will receive their offer after they've been admitted to the university. So you're not going to get an offer of admission or an offer of financial aid from us until you've received that admission letter. For early decision, your deadline is, we want to make sure that you have that in by December 8th. So that should be filled out by December 8th. Early action as well. With early decision, your financial aid package will be available the week of December 16th. I will tell you it's probably going to be towards the end of that week as we get everything ready. For early action, probably around the second week of January. If we can get it out to you earlier, we will. And then regular decision is March 3rd priority deadline. And the goal is with regular decision, if you've met that March 3rd priority deadline, we should be able to get that financial aid package out to you probably within about 24 hours of being admitted to the university. So turnaround time is fairly quick. on our financial aid packages. If for some reason you are unable to meet these deadlines, the December 8th or the March 3rd, we will accept applications for financial aid throughout the summer. We don't want you to wait that long because we do want to make sure you're able to make a decision about attending. But if there is an issue with your FAFSA, we will certainly try to help you out and get the information to you as quickly as we can based on when you get us the FAFSA information. Again, to get your financial aid offer, the FAFSA must be completed. The results of the FAFSA must be valid, and no additional information would be needed. So sometimes there's income and asset information, additional income and asset information that's needed that we have to verify. We'll still be able to generate a preliminary financial aid offer pending the receipt of those documents, and we'll tell you exactly what documents you might need. If it's something that has to do with identity or citizenship verification, we won't be able to generate that preliminary financial aid offer until we've received that information. And again, if we're asking you for that, we will be very clear on the documentation that we need, and we'll make sure that you get that email, the emailed letter that tells you exactly what we're looking for. Some information about the FAFSA. The FAFSA is for U.S. citizens and eligible non-citizens. And again, this is for need-based financial aid. This is not for merit scholarships or those academic or those talent scholarships that are departmental funds. It determines your eligibility for federal, state, and institutional aid. And the only place that you can fill out the FAFSA is FAFSA.gov or studentaid.gov. FAFSA.gov is just a redirect to studentaid.gov, but those are the only two websites that you can use to fill out the FAFSA. You're going to fill out with tax information from prior year, so that's 2023 for the 2025-26 academic year. And then all other questions are as of the day you sign it. So we're using tax information from 2023 and everything else from as of the day that you sign the FAFSA. A couple of notes about the FAFSA. You don't need to wait to be admitted. You can fill out the FAFSA starting December 1. We will have it in our office waiting, and we'll be able to generate those offers on that timeline that we talked about. But again, you won't receive that until after you are admitted. The completion flow for the FAFSA, this is the ideal flow. You can do it out of order, but it's not recommended that you do it out of order. You want to start with the student. So the student will log in and begin their FAFSA. They'll provide consent for the information to come from the IRS. They're going to answer a couple of questions. They will complete what's called the parent wizard. And then they will invite parents to be contributors based on the information on the parent wizard. The student is going to sign the FAFSA with their FSA ID and password. And then the parent will get the invitation that they'll need to accept. The invitation comes through email. They're going to go through the same process. They're going to provide consent. They're going to verify the IRS information if it's requested, answer any kind of asset questions, and you'll also sign that with your own FSA ID and password. So you do want to make sure that you have your FSA ID and password, both student and parent. If you don't, when you start the FAFSA or when you accept the invitation, you will be able to create that FSA ID and password. After that, the FAFSA is complete and it starts processing and eventually makes its way to Chapman University and the other universities that you've selected. A couple of things you need to know about the FAFSA. Who is a parent on the FAFSA? Whose information are we expecting to see for dependent students? It's the parent who provides the most financial support for the student and that parent's spouse if they're married or remarried, regardless of any prenuptial agreements or any kind of court orders. If the parent is remarried that provides the most financial support, we need that parent and the parent's spouse's information. If the parents are not married but live together, both parents will provide their information. If the financial support is equal, then the parent who made the most in the year being reported on will be required to complete their information on the FAFSA. Physical custody is not considered, so we don't use that as a marker as to whose information is provided on the FAFSA. It's strictly the financial support. And important to note is that the FAFSA does not recognize informal separation. So when the FAFSA asks you if you've been separated, or if you're currently separated from your spouse, when you're filling out the FAFSA, they do indicate that that is formal separation, which means typically there's papers that have been filed with the court that indicate that you are separated. Important to note, I think I have it up there. Yeah, if the parent pays child support and the child support is more than 50% of the child's total financial support, the parent who pays the child support is the parent of record for the FAFSA. So just to reiterate, if the child support payments are more than 50% of the child's total financial support, then it's the parent who pays the child support who needs to be on the FAFSA. So essentially, the federal government is looking for the parent who's who's providing the most financial support for the student in all different scenarios. A little bit more about the parent information on the FAFSA. The parent wizard will help students determine who should be providing the information. Both parents may need to be collaborators if they're married and filed. If they're married and filed jointly, only one parent will need to be a collaborator. If they're married and filing separate on their taxes, then both parents will need to be contributors on the FAFSA. Parents without a social security number can still get an FSA ID. It might take a little bit longer, so you do want to make sure you're giving yourself time for that. And if a parent loses, deletes, or declines their invitation, the student must re-invite the parent. Okay, so you can't call into the federal processor, you can't call into our office. The student has to log back into their FAFSA and re-invite the parent or parents to the FAFSA as a contributor. We can't do that for you, and the federal government can't do that for you. If you do have a business or farm, we do need the value of any business or farm, regardless of the size, regardless of the number of employees. Value is the market value of all assets minus the debt to that business or farm, not the entire debt of the family. So only the business or farm debt is considered, only the business or farm value is considered. Assets might include things like computers, company cars, phones, etc. All of those things, if you have a home-based business, for example, it might be inventory, it might be your computer. It's the things that are dedicated to your business. FAFSA questions are pretty basic with the simplified FAFSA. It's basic demographic information for the student and the parents. They're going to ask some dependency questions to determine if parents need to provide their information. There's going to be some income information that's automatically retrieved from the IRS and asset information that you're going to input as of the day you signed the FAFSA. So pretty simple. Each student applying for financial aid must complete the FAFSA. So if you have multiple students who are in college at the same time, each student has their own FAFSA. Students are going to complete the FAFSA each year. So we do expect our returning students to complete the FAFSA. We're not able to award them additional financial aid beyond merit scholarships and departmental scholarships without having that FAFSA on file. Most changes to the FAFSA will be completed through our office. It's going to be based on verification if students are randomly selected. And that's where the federal government tells us that we need to confirm that the information on the FAFSA is correct. It can be any number of questions, anything that you provide on the FAFSA, we can ask you to verify that information, and we will reach out to you directly if that's the case. We do not utilize any other financial aid application for need-based financial aid. So we don't utilize the profile, we don't utilize any kind of institutional application, we only utilize the FAFSA form. A couple of frequently asked questions. How will Chapman Financial Aid Office communicate with my student? We're going to be communicating with students through their campus-generated email. If we don't have that on file, it will be through their personal email. But we are going to be communicating directly with the student in all cases. If parents want to ask questions, that's great. We'll be happy to answer those questions. But outgoing communication is typically first to the student. Can I get a bigger merit scholarship? So you're going to get, if you receive a merit scholarship, you're going to get that letter in the beginning when you're admitted to the university. If something has changed from the time that you submitted your application and the time that we've offered your merit scholarship, then you can talk to your admission counselor and they'll be able to walk you through that process if we need additional information to determine if that's the case. It could be that we didn't have the full set of transcripts or grades might have been changed because of incomplete work or things like that. And our admission office would be happy to review that and see if it makes a difference for you. We are a Division III university, so we do not offer athletic scholarships, nor can we consider athletic participation in any scholarships that we offer. So that will not be considered. We do not have those athletic scholarships. We make a certain amount of money. You say whatever that number is. Should we complete the FAFSA? My answer to that question is always yes. Let us look at that information when you complete it on the FAFSA, and we'll determine whether or not you qualify for financial aid. We don't want you to exclude yourself from consideration. And even if it's only student loans and you may not want those the first year, if you need them in subsequent years, you want to make sure you're completing the FAFSA. Or if there's an emergency later on or you change your mind, we want to make sure you have that FAFSA completed so that you have those funds available to you. Is my financial aid package guaranteed to stay the same each year? It's a yes and a no question there. Um, we try to make sure that it does, but it is going to depend on changes to the family's financial situation from year to year. So if there are changes in your financial situation from year to year, your package may go up or your package may go down depending on what that change is. Typically, it needs to be a pretty significant change for your financial aid to be impacted. It may also depend on financial aid programs and what's available through the federal and state government in a given year. Sometimes budgets are not determined this far out for most financial aid programs at the state level and the federal level are not determined 4 years out. They're determined on a yearly basis. So we are sort of at the mercy of the federal government and the state government for those programs when they determine the amounts that are available each year. What if the FAFSA does not reflect my current financial situation accurately? We do have an appeal process, and that is where you provide us with some additional information. We have an appeal form that requires a letter of explanation as well as documentation supporting the information that you're presenting. And we might also ask you for some tax return information. We're happy to review that and see if that does make a change in your financial aid eligibility. Generally, we're looking for things that are unique to your situation that impact your financial situation. Things that are not unique to your situation are generally dealt with in the original financial aid calculation and are not considered an appeal. So that's things like where you live, what state you live in, what city you live in, what county. That information is taken into consideration on the back end financial aid calculations. um, Other things that are not necessarily unique to your situation might be, for example, insurance premiums. Um, we're required to have insurance, and so if you're paying a premium on that, so is everyone else. We don't take that into consideration. But you might have extenuating medical circumstances where your copays and your out-of-pocket medical expenses are greatly increased, and that's something that we could look at. A little bit more about appeals. I always encourage you to talk to us first about your situation. Talking to us is a way for us to be able to gauge how we can help you and how we can guide you. It can also solve a lot of frustrations because, for example, if you're telling us that you have a $500 medical bill, that may not be something that tips the needle in financial aid eligibility versus something like $50,000 in medical expenses that you're going to be paying in the year. That's something that we can look at, and maybe that's something that we need to walk you through of what exactly we need to be looking at. So it saves you frustration because we don't want you to put together an appeal package to send to us where we're not able to look at it or it's not going to affect your financial aid eligibility. Things to appeal, circumstances from the last year that have impacted your family's financial situation. So essentially, anything that's changed from the time that you file those taxes that you're reporting on. Things that happened before that time are already reflected in your financial information. So we're not really going to be looking at that because anything that happened before that 2023 tax year is already there. So we've already seen it. If it's a parent that may have lost a job prior to the tax year, we're already seeing that reflected in the income and assets. So that's not something that we could take into consideration. Parent losing their job after we filed the taxes, that's something that we might be able to consider based on the timing. The first time the appeal form will become available is in January. The best time to appeal is after you've received your financial aid offer. Before that, you don't know what you're appealing, right? So, if you were to receive a really great financial aid package and you're looking at and you've already submitted an appeal, but you don't know what you're appealing for, we don't really know how to help you with that because we haven't seen what's going on. And even if you were to submit an appeal prior to receiving your financial aid package, we wouldn't be able to do anything with that information until after that FAFSA is received and the appeal has been generated. So we'd rather kind of have you do things in the order. Give us a call once you get your financial aid offer and there's something that you need to appeal. Go ahead and appeal, and that process will start in January for regular decision. It'll start sometime at the end of March. Things not to appeal or things that we're not going to be able to consider in an appeal: consumer debt, mortgage payments, offers from other colleges, other students or parents in college, the student's qualifications. Student qualifications are taken into consideration in the admission application, so we've already looked at those things, and things that happened more than a year ago or more than that tax year. For my international students that are watching the presentation today, you will also be reviewed for merit scholarships based on your admission application. You're on the same time frame, so those applications will be reviewed and you'll receive that offer if you do qualify for a merit scholarship at the point of admission. Same with departmental scholarships, you will be reviewed for those as well. And then we do have a Delphin International Student Scholarship. Applicants who may qualify will be contacted by their admission counselor directly, and they'll be walked through that process. So the admission office, your admission counselors are really going to take the lead on walking you through that process for that Delphin International Scholarship if you qualify. It is need-based, and there's some documentation that does need to be presented in order to be reviewed for that. So I'm going to ask Jonathan to come back into the conversation here. And my colleagues have been answering questions throughout. And so, Jonathan, what were some questions that we had out there?
There's tons of questions, but as you mentioned, our team has been answering them very fast. But common questions, David. Can students receive a merit scholarship without applying for FAFSA?
Absolutely. Remember, the merit scholarship is awarded at the point of admission based on your admission application. So we're not even looking at the FAFSA for consideration for merit scholarships. You don't need to complete a FAFSA. If you're completing a FAFSA and you get a merit scholarship and next year you decide you only need that merit scholarship to enroll, you don't need to complete the FAFSA in order to renew your merit scholarship either.
Another question is in regards to parents' income. Say parents make a lot of money. Do you still encourage students and their parents to apply for FAFSA?
Absolutely. Let us do the work on that and determine your eligibility. Don't disqualify yourself. Um, for you, a lot of money may be different than what we consider a lot of money, what the federal government considers a lot of money. So we do encourage you to fill out that FAFSA and let us do the calculations there. Just like we don't want you to diagnose yourself on WebMD if you're feeling sick, let the expert handle it. We're the experts. Let us figure out your financial aid eligibility instead of trying to disqualify yourself.
Thank you. There is a specific question on when a student and their contributor applies for FAFSA. If the parents are divorced, separated, the question is about who has access to whose information, or is it kept separately? The parent is, if they're divorced, they're asking would their partner be able to access the parent's finances?
At the university level, the answer is no, unless the student and the parent give us authorization to speak to a third party. Um, at the federal level, it's a little bit different. The answer is generally no. However, it's important to know that when your student is completing their FAFSA, it is their application, so they do see the information that is being presented on the FAFSA. So it's a good opportunity for parents to talk to their students about responsible use of information, because ultimately that's their that's their decision whether or not they share it, but they do have access to it if they log back into their FAFSA portal.
Thank you. There is another question in regards to, are there any other resources for low-income students or diversity-related scholarships, or does FAFSA cover it?
Sure. We encourage all students, regardless of their economic status, regardless of what category of student they might fall into, diversity, all of that. We encourage all students to complete a private scholarship search using some of the free resources. We have some great resources on our website. If you go to the financial aid section of the Chapman website, we link to some free scholarship search engines. We also link to our Facebook page um, that we post all the time, scholarships, a couple scholarships a week on there that we receive information for. So we do encourage you to complete the FAFSA, but it's really kind of a two-pronged system is, keep that scholarship search up, utilize the resources on your high school campus as well. Most high schools have scholarship listings in their portal system and keep applying for those. You don't have to reinvent the wheel every time you complete a scholarship application, a private scholarship application. Most of the time, you can be using the same or similar essays with just a little bit of tweak. Um, those same letters of recommendation with just little bits of tweak in there as well. But we definitely encourage students to complete that private scholarship search as well. This year, for example, I have a student who brought into the university, I think it was about $15,000, but maybe closer to $20,000 in private scholarships. So there is money out there. The wider you cast your net, the better.
So there's were a couple of questions in regards to deadlines you mentioned.
Mhm.
Some parents acknowledge that there was a lot of complications with last year's FAFSA. If there are glitches or delays, would those deadlines be changed, or would they still be due specifically for the early action December 8th?
The early action, yeah, saying that there were some small complications with the FAFSA last year is an understatement. We are not anticipating that there will be issues. Unlike last year, the federal government Department of Education has been testing over the last 2 months. They actually opened up the FAFSA on October 1st for a small group of students to process. And as far as we know, processing is going well. Um, on the off chance that there is an issue with the FAFSA not being able to open up on December 1 as expected, we will notify students of the plan, the contingency plan that we do have in place to balance that out.
Talking about previous FAFSA applications, there is a question about multiple siblings in college
Mhm.
and how or if that is factored into the financial aid offer.
Multiple siblings in college is not something that's considered in the financial aid offer.
Okay, I'm trying to keep up with these all these questions. Um, can you speak on a little bit about whether or not the process is similar for students that are independent?
The process is it's the exact same process for students who are independent. And those are students who meet the dependency qualifications on the FAFSA. When you go through and complete the FAFSA, you'll still go through, I believe, the parent wizard. Although, no, they actually ask you the dependency questions before the parent wizard. So you'll answer some questions about what makes you a dependent or an independent student. And based on those answers, you'll still put in your own financial information. But if no contributor information is needed, then it will not be asked for. You'll still go through the same process where it gets processed through and sent to our office, and then we will get that offer out to you.
There is a question um, somewhere in the chat, but I lost it. But it has to do with, what does a parent without a social security number, so students with mixed family,
Mhm.
do they have to go somewhere else to create an FSA ID, or would they be eligible to create that ID?
As far as we know, for this coming up year, if the process works the same as it did last year, you do still go to complete the FAFSA, and when it comes time to create that FSA ID, you'll start the process just like everyone else, and then there will be a secondary verification process that you'll have to complete. So it may take you just a little bit longer, and the website will walk you through the next steps that you need to complete in order to get that FSA ID. But it is not dependent on your social security number.
Okay, let me see. So there's a question about housing and food and whether or not the student is within a certain radius of the campus. Is housing required? Are they required to pay to live on housing and do a meal plan?
Our residency requirement, and my admission colleagues will catch me if this is incorrect, so I'll look in the chat just in case. We do have a 3-year residency requirement for first-year students. If they are within a certain radius of the campus, and I believe that's a 30-mile radius, we're still going to assume that they need housing, and you will work with the residential life office to determine whether or not you're within that radius and whether you don't need housing based on that information. You are not required to purchase a meal plan if you're a commuter student. We do offer meal plans designed for commuter students. We also offer a declining balance card um, where you can put money on your ID card, and use that at the eateries on campus as well. But students who are in housing, in traditional first-year housing, are required to have a full meal plan. When you move into potentially your second and third year, and you're moving into our campus apartment style living, you do have a full kitchen, and at that point, you are not required to have a meal plan.
Is FAFSA or housing option, and I think one of our admissions counselors is answering it right now. Different, is any process different for transfer students than first year students out of high school?
As far as the financial aid process, no, it's the same process. So you're completing that FAFSA, you're doing your admission application. There's going to be some different information that our admission colleagues are going to need on the admission application. It's a little bit different of an application. And depending on how far out of high school you are and other college credits that you might have, they'll be asking for those. But as far as the process for receiving financial aid, it's still just that FAFSA form.
As far as completing the FAFSA, how long does it usually take to complete the form, given the automatic transferring of tax information and whatnot?
Legitimately, we haven't seen the numbers yet from this current year, but in the previous FAFSA, it was typically under 30 minutes. Um, with the new FAFSA, in all seriousness, about 15 minutes because of the information being transferred from the IRS. I think the student does a little more heavy lifting because they're doing things like putting in the schools that they're sending information to, indicating some high school information, whereas the parents are putting in their demographic information, um, carrying over the IRS, and then answering a couple of questions at the end. So each part should be about 15 minutes tops.
Thank you. There's questions about the Parent Plus loan and also student loans. Where do individuals find more information about loans, student federal loans?
Yep. The most current interest rates and origination fees are always going to be available on studentaid.gov, studentaid.gov. And that's kind of the clearinghouse website for all things financial aid directly from the federal government. So if you type in student loan, information about student loans will pop up. If it's loan interest rate, you can click on there and you'll get that information. Parent loan is called a plus loan. You can type in parent loan or plus loan, and it'll bring you to that page as well. We also have information on our website, so you can always type in student loans in the Chapman search engine, and it'll take you to our financial aid page.
Thank you. There are several questions about who would be a contributor, but as you mentioned, the wizard would assist in answering, in guiding you on who is the contributor and who is the parent
Correct.
who will be needed to fill out that FAFSA.
Correct. Just a reminder that it's based on the most financial support, not custodial, um, not custodial parent.
Mhm. Okay, let's see. Answered that. Couple questions about whether Chapman offers full rides, so full tuition, mandatory fees, housing and food covered, and what do they expect? They are calculating your $208 million and dividing it with the total student population. So can you elaborate on that?
Sure. We do have a couple full tuition, full what we'd call full ride scholarship, and we'll categorize that into two separate categories. The first is a full ride scholarship that includes housing. Those are very specific programs that we have, and they are in collaboration with particular organizations and particular departments on campus. So students who are already in those programs um, have been notified that they're qualifying or potentially going to qualify for that. So for example, we have a women in entertainment program that's based on high school participation in a particular program in Los Angeles. It can be any major. Students who have already participated in that program are reviewed for eligibility, and that's determined by a committee. So there's no separate application there. And that really is, we have another partnership with an organization called Give Something Back, and those are our two full scholarship, full ride with housing programs. We do have a program that covers tuition fees for students within Orange County. They do have to meet certain qualifications, income qualifications. Um, we have information listed on our website, and that program is called our Orange County Heritage or OC Heritage Program. You can check that out on our website. It's got this current year's qualifications on there. Um, I, with the other programs that I mentioned that include housing, I think we have a total of 20 students or so across all programs and all years. With the OCH program, we have about 150 students, I believe, in that program across all programs and all years. So those are highly competitive scholarship opportunities that not everyone will qualify for.
Beside FAFSA, what are other resources students get to help pay for college?
Sure. So we talked about some of those things that are in the toolbox. College savings plans, monthly payments through our student business services, and then again those private scholarship searches. I can't emphasize enough how important those are. I saw a question about timing of the scholarships. What if my student is just too busy to be doing that right now? Is there an advantage? Um, is there an advantage? Yes, because the applications vary, the deadlines vary for each of those scholarships. So if your student's waiting until March or April and they're going to be a fall start the next fall, they're really cutting down the scholarship opportunities that are available to them because some of those application deadlines are going to be, December, January, February, March to get money out to students by the next semester.
Okay. Um, on average, they're talking about loans and how much students get out of loans versus merit award and scholarship and scholarships. What a breakdown of the financial aid package for students that one commonly sees when attending Chapman.
Sure. For a first year student, the maximum that a student can borrow in their first year is $3,500 plus an additional $2,000, so $5,500. Um, so students, we typically will offer the maximum amount in a financial aid package, and you have every opportunity to decline that or accept that. You're not required to do either. As you move into your second year, it's $6,500 total, and then as you move into your third and fourth year, it's $7,500 total. Um, the average loan debt at Chapman, depending on the year of, the statistics were pretty even. We're right around 22 to $23,000 in federal loans.
Question about multiple siblings in college. About if parents already are doing one sibling, would they have to create another FSA ID for the other sibling, or how would that work?
So each student needs to have their own FSA ID, but the parent is going to use the same FSA ID to sign the information, to sign each FAFSA. So if you have 3 students in college, each of them has their own FAFSA, their own FSA ID, and as a parent, you have the one that can sign all 3 of them.
And to clarify, would they have to redo their information for each student, each of their childs, or would their information carry over?
We have been told that, and I have no way to know that it's true, other than parents who have done it, that once you input your information, all you need to do is log in to the other students' FAFSAs, and it automatically populates once you provide consent. Um, Unfortunately, we don't have any way to test that on our side, but we have not heard that it is not working. And it was one of the things that worked well last year. So it should be a fairly easy process.
Are there any other scholarships for international students? You mentioned the Dolphin Scholarship, but are there any other ones that
So
Chapman offers?
it's the Merit Scholarship, the Delphin Scholarship, and departmental funding.
Um, what is the average percentage increase in tuition fee and housing fee across years?
Generally speaking, we're going to be looking at anywhere from 2.5% to 4.5%. I know that's a big range, but it's going to be dependent on the current economic climate, um, and the research that we've done and any kind of enhancements that we're completing on campus at that point, and any kind of enhanced services we're providing to students at that point. So 2.5 to 4.5% on average. That, the obvious average there is going to be 3.5%. So, but somewhere in that range of 2.5 to 4.5.
I assume this is a follow-up with a sibling, multiple children in college. When things are transferred over or a parent is filling out their multiple siblings, does that mean that the student aid index score would be the same for each student, or would it be different?
Well, the student aid index is made up of 2 numbers. One is a portion that comes from the student, and one is a portion that comes from the parent. So the information coming from the parent is going to be the same. So that portion is going to be identical. The portion that's going to be different is the student side. So each student is going to have their own financial information presented, and that's going to be factored into that student's FAFSA only. So it's a combination. The SAI that you see is a combination of the student SAI and the parent SAI together. And so the parent is going to stay the same, but the student's financial situation might change from student to student. So you might have 3 different SAIs for 3 different students, even though the parent information is the same, the student information might be different.
As far as departmental awards for a student, Does it vary across different majors, colleges? Is there an average amount that is given? And is there a supplemental application that needs to be submitted?
For departmental awards, the answer is it depends. For our arts-based programs, things like theater, um, you may need a portfolio, a video audition, an in-person audition. So there is kind of a separate item there. Other departments that don't have something, they're not going to have something separate. Um, so it's going to be reviewed by the department at the time of admission.
Um, let's see. So there's questions about students with special needs, disabilities. What is financial aid or are there financial aid or scholarships in regards to that? And maybe what is there a department on campus that would assist in regards to a student with those needs?
Sure. Students who have individualized needs will work with our Disability Resources Office. Our colleagues over there will determine, what kind of accommodations might be needed. We do not offer special financial aid for students with disabilities. However, we do have certain accommodations for students with disabilities. So, for example, most forms of financial aid at Chapman, you are required to be full-time. Full-time is 12 credits per term. And sometimes an accommodation for a student is that they need to be enrolled in 9 units. And if that's the case, and we receive the accommodation notice from Disability Resources, we will prorate the financial aid down to a 9 unit total based on the number of units that you're in. That's one thing that I do have to clarify is that for students with disabilities, the federal government does say that if we've established that 12 units is full-time for all students, that is 12 credits is full-time for all students, not one particular group of students. So we do have to consider students at their actual credit level and report them that way. But the accommodation that we do make is that if it's approved through disability services, we will go ahead and prorate financial aid for a student who's not full-time.
Thank you. We have a question about maintaining eligibility to keep the financial aid that they were offered. Can
Sure.
you elaborate on that?
Sure. From the academic side of the house, to keep most forms of financial aid, you need to be completing at least 12 units per academic term. So that's 12 in the fall and 12 in the spring. So that's full time. And you need to have a grade point average of 2.0 or above. To maintain eligibility for merit scholarships, same unit requirement, but you do have to have a grade point average of 2.75 or above. Then when we're looking at departmental scholarships, you'll receive a letter from the department indicating what your renewal criteria is. Most of the time they're using the same GPA and unit requirements, but there might be a participation portion of that, which shouldn't be a problem. You're in the department, you're being active in the department, and so you will be required to maintain that activity in the department. Also, if you change majors and you are offered a departmental scholarship, that scholarship does not follow you. There are some certain exceptions in the sciences where it does follow you, but for example, if you're offered a theater scholarship and you move over into the sciences, that scholarship will not follow you. So GPA, units, and then departmental.
Thank you. We're having a lot of very specific questions here. Um, as always, if you have very, very specific questions, you can always email us or email your admissions counselor for that. Let's see. In regards to scenarios for appeal purposes, is retirement considered a unique event for that?
Generally, no. Retirement itself is not considered a unique event. However, if there's an income change from retirement, then yes. Um, but remember, we're going to be looking at, needing documentation. And so some of the things we might look at is what is your income from a pension? What is your income from your retirement accounts going to be? Um, things like that. How are you going to make up the difference in the income? Was this a planned retirement, a forced retirement? So the loss of income is what would generate an appeal, not necessarily just that you're retiring.
Then we have a question about first generation students. Got another question in regards to that. Does Chapman offer any form of financial aid for first gen students? And what is the
Um,
definition of first
sure.
generation, Chapman's
Uh,
definition?
First generation student is a student who does not have a parent who has completed college. So you'll see that question asked on the Common App as well as the FAFSA. We do have a program called the Thurgood Marshall Scholarship. There are some income limitations on that we look at SAI as well to determine if you qualify for that. It's automatic. There's not a separate application for that. So it's based on the information on your FAFSA and your Common App, and we will process that through. And if you qualify, we will let you know it'll be on your financial aid offer.
I think we are getting close to time here.
Probably have time
Um,
for one more question.
let's see. Oh, the pressure to choose the question. That one last question. Okay, let's see. Okay, well, we have a very unique question, and there were multiple questions in regards to that. So if they have twins, a parent has twins, how would their financial aid offer differ? Again, you mentioned that siblings will submit their own, um, the students will submit their own part of the FAFSA, and the parents will submit their own. What if they have everything the same? Would they be expected to get the same SAI?
Um, SAI wise, if it's two students who have no income and it's just the parent information, again, yes, it's the difference in the situation is the student component. So it's the differences would be based on the student information. Will their financial aid packages be the same? Not necessarily, unless their academic credentials are identical, because they might qualify for different merit scholarship amounts, for example. They might be in different majors or have different levels of funding from the department. So we can't guarantee that the the financial aid package will be the same because there's other factors that go into it besides strictly the SAI. Is the SAI the same? It depends on the student.
I think that is it.
Great. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening. Again, the link will be sent to you. And any questions that we need to answer in the chat, we will follow up if there are specific questions that are not already answered within the context of the presentation. Thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy your evening.